On June 7, 1942, the USS Yorktown slipped beneath the Pacific Ocean. She was the largest American aircraft carrier in the fleet. 3 days earlier, her crew had abandoned her. They believed she would capsize within minutes. She didn't. For 72 hours, the Yorktown floated alone in the darkness. A salvage party reboarded her, and they were making progress. Then a Japanese submarine found them. The official history calls her loss inevitable. Bombs and torpedoes had inflicted fatal damage, and nothing could have saved her. For over 80 years, that explanation stood unchallenged. But when advanced remotely operated vehicles descended 3 miles to the wreck in 2023 and 2025, they captured details that earlier expeditions missed entirely. They penetrated the hangar deck for the first time. They found aircraft still armed with bombs. They found a hand-painted mural the crew had kept hidden. They found a civilian car that had no business being on a warship. What the cameras recorded left researchers flabbergasted. And what they revealed about the Yorktown's final hours raises a question the official history never addressed. Was she truly beyond saving? Or did failures no one talks about seal her fate long before the torpedoes hit? The Yorktown wasn't just another carrier. When she launched in 1936, she represented everything the Navy had learned about naval aviation. At 809 feet long, she could carry 90 aircraft and a wartime crew of nearly 3,000 men. First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt served as her sponsor. She was the lead ship of her class. Her sisters Enterprise and Hornet would become legends. But Yorktown came first, and she set the standard. By early 1942, she had already proven herself. She took part in the Marshall and Gilbert Islands raids, and in strikes on Salamaua and Lae. When Japan pushed toward Australia, Yorktown stood in the way. At the Battle of the Coral Sea in May 1942, she helped stop the Japanese advance on Port Moresby. Her aircraft sank the light carrier Shoho, but the victory came at a cost. A 551-pound bomb plunged through her flight deck and exploded 6 decks below. Near misses opened seams in her hull. She limped toward Pearl Harbor, trailing an oil slick 10 miles long. Experts estimated she needed 90 days of repairs. Admiral Chester Nimitz gave them 3. Nimitz knew something the Japanese did not. American codebreakers had cracked the enemy's communications. A massive Japanese fleet was heading for Midway. The attack would come on June 4th. Nimitz had exactly 1 week to prepare. He had 2 undamaged carriers, Enterprise and Hornet. Against 4 Japanese fleet carriers, that was not enough. He needed Yorktown. On May 27th, the wounded carrier eased into dry dock number 1 at Pearl Harbor. Water still pooled in the basin as inspectors waded through to examine her hull. Nimitz stood among them. He stared at the burst seams, the buckled plates, the damage that should have kept her in the yard for months. He turned to his officers. "We must have this ship back in 3 days. Silence. Then a hull repair expert named Lieutenant Commander H.J. Pfingstag swallowed hard and said, "Yes, sir." What followed became legend. Over 1,400 workers swarmed the ship. They worked around the clock under floodlights. Rolling blackouts swept across Oahu to provide enough electricity for the welding. Men ate sandwiches with cutting torches still in their hands. They slept on the deck where they dropped and woke to keep working. In 72 hours, they patched the flight deck so cleanly it appeared undamaged. They sealed the hull breaches. They made her seaworthy. But they could not fix everything. The superheater boilers damaged at Coral Sea were never touched. Her top speed would be limited to 20 knots instead of her designed 32. The hull patches were welded rather than riveted. Welded repairs were faster to install, but fragile under stress. On May 30th, Yorktown steamed out of Pearl Harbor to join Enterprise and Hornet. Thousands of shipyard workers lined the docks, cheering. The Japanese believed she was already sunk. She would be a nasty surprise, but she carried vulnerabilities no one discussed. Shortcuts were made under impossible pressure, and systems were never fully tested. These weaknesses would not matter unless everything went wrong at once. At Midway, everything would go wrong at once. You are right. I significantly exceeded the target. Let me rewrite Act T2 properly within the 550 to 600 word limit. The morning of June 4th, 1942 would decide the war in the Pacific. 4 Japanese carriers steamed toward Midway, the same striking force that had devastated Pearl Harbor. Against them stood 3 American carriers, Enterprise, Hornet, and the ship the Japanese believed was already on the bottom of the Coral Sea. Shortly after 10 in the morning, Yorktown launched 17 Dauntless dive bombers. They found Soryu with her deck packed with aircraft being refueled. 3 bombs struck home. Within 20 minutes, Soryu was burning. Enterprise's bombers hit Akagi and Kaga, 3 carriers destroyed in 5 minutes. But one remained. Hiryu launched everything she had. All of it aimed at Yorktown. 18 Valdive bombers arrived just before noon. 3 bombs found their target. 1 struck the flight deck. Another plunged down the smokestack and disabled 5 boilers. The third started fires below. Japanese pilots flew home reporting Yorktown destroyed. They were wrong. Damage control parties extinguished the fires within an hour. Engineers restored 4 boilers. The flight deck crew patched the holes so quickly that returning pilots could not tell where the bombs had hit. By 1400, Yorktown was making 20 knots. The Japanese would have to kill her again. Hiryu's second strike found Yorktown still fighting. 10 Kate torpedo bombers pressed through anti-aircraft fire. Yorktown was limited to 20 knots. Her undamaged sisters could make 32. Against determined attackers, those 12 knots were the difference between life and death. 2 torpedoes slammed into her port side within 30 seconds. The explosions ruptured fuel tanks and flooded compartments across 50 feet. The rudder jammed. Then the lights went out. All steam pressure dropped to 0. Main electrical power failed. The after-emergency diesel generator started. For a moment, hope. Then the circuit breakers failed to hold. Short circuits made the backup power useless. Without electricity, the pumps couldn't run. Without pumps, flooding couldn't be controlled. Yorktown was paralyzed. The list climbed. 23 degrees, 26 degrees. Captain Buckmaster consulted his damage control officer. Both reached the same conclusion. The ship would capsize within minutes. At 17:02, he gave the order: abandon ship. The crew went over the side in good order. Buckmaster was last off, touring the ship one final time before lowering himself into the water. Behind him, Yorktown floated alone. She did not capsize. She did not sink. She refused to die. Through the night, Yorktown drifted. 2 men were discovered still alive aboard the next morning, one signaling with machine gun fire. Buckmaster organized a salvage party. 170 volunteers reboarded on June 6th. The tug Vireo took her under tow. The destroyer Hammond came alongside to provide power. The crew jettisoned gear in counter-flooded compartments. Slowly, the list decreased. 2 degrees were recovered. The ship was responding. Then I-168 found them. The submarine slipped through the screen, undetected. 4 torpedoes. The first broke Hammond in half. More than 80 sailors died. 2 more struck Yorktown. The salvage party evacuated. At dawn on June 7th, Yorktown rolled onto her beam ends and slipped beneath the surface. The official history said accumulated battle damage, bombs, torpedoes, and a submarine attack. Case closed, except she had floated for 3 days after abandonment. The salvage crew was making progress, and the circuit breakers that killed her power had failed for reasons no one fully explained. For 56 years, Yorktown lay undisturbed, 3 miles down. Beyond the reach of sunlight, divers were answers. In May 1998, Robert Ballard found her. The same oceanographer who had discovered the Titanic turned his attention to the Pacific. A joint expedition with the United States Navy and National Geographic descended into the darkness northwest of Hawaii. What they found was remarkable. Yorktown sat upright on the seafloor, her hull largely intact, her island superstructure recognizable. After more than half a century, she looked like a ship that had simply settled onto the bottom and gone to sleep. But the expedition faced severe limitations. The depth pushed equipment to its absolute limits. Remotely operated vehicles failed, cutting dive time short. The cameras could observe the exterior, circling the wreck and documenting its general condition. But they could not penetrate the interior. The hangar deck remained hidden. The damage patterns could only be glimpsed from outside. Whatever artifacts lay within stayed in darkness. Ballard's team confirmed where Yorktown rested. They captured images of her final pose, but the details that might explain her final hours remained inaccessible. The technology simply didn't exist yet. Official reports were written from memory. Captain Buckmaster compiled his account from officers who had survived. They described what they experienced. They could not explain what they had not witnessed. Why did the circuit breakers fail? The emergency diesel generator started. Power was available, but something in the damaged wiring caused short circuits that made the backup system useless. Was this connected to the rushed repairs at Pearl Harbor? Had the 72-hour miracle left vulnerabilities in the electrical systems that no one had time to test? The damage report noted that torpedo impacts on Yorktown extended 52 feet from the point of explosion. On ships torpedoed at Pearl Harbor, damage never extended more than 36 feet. Why was Yorktown's hull so much more vulnerable? Had the welded patches weakened her structural integrity? And what about the aircraft? Yorktown had been recovering planes when the torpedo bombers struck. Were any still aboard when she sank? What happened to them? The questions accumulated. The answers lay 3 miles down, locked inside a wreck that 1998 technology could photograph but not explore. The hangar deck held the real story. That was where the crew had worked, where aircraft had been armed and fueled, where the chaos of battle had unfolded in the moments before power failed. No camera had ever looked inside. The internal damage patterns might reveal whether the hasty repairs had contributed to her loss. The positions of equipment might show what the crew was attempting when the torpedoes hit. The artifacts might tell human stories that official reports never captured. As one lead scientist would later note, in a battle as intense as Midway, the fury and frenzy of combat meant that not every aspect or detail of what happened made it into the history books. The physical evidence existed. It was simply waiting for technology capable of finding it. 25 years after Ballard's discovery, technology had transformed. In September 2023, Ocean Exploration Trust deployed ROV Atalanta from the research vessel Nautilus. The mission was part of a larger expedition to document the Midway battlefield. For the first time, researchers conducted a comprehensive archaeological survey of Yorktown. They recorded over 14 hours of dive footage. They performed methodical documentation of the hull at every elevation, and they assessed battle damage visible from the outside. But a glimpse through an open hangar door revealed something tantalizing. A shadowy shape that looked like an aircraft wing appeared in the light. Equipment limitations prevented a closer investigation. The question lingered. In April 2025, NOAA returned with the research vessel Okeanos Explorer. This time, the goal was penetration. The remotely operated vehicle Deep Discoverer would go where no camera had gone before, inside the hangar deck, through the elevator shafts, into the spaces where Yorktown's crew had fought and worked and prepared for battle. The Naval History and Heritage Command had designated the wreck a site of extraordinary character. What the cameras would find justified that designation completely. The remotely operated vehicle descended into the number 2 elevator shaft. Lights swept across the walls, and then the operators saw it. A hand-painted mural, 42 feet wide, 12 feet tall. A world map tracking every voyage the Yorktown had made since her commissioning in 1937. The title read, "A Chart of the Cruises of the USS Yorktown." The colors were still vivid, blues and greens marking the oceans she had crossed. Lines traced her path from Norfolk to the Pacific. The routes of her combat missions showed beneath streaks of rust. Researchers watching the live feed fell silent. Then they reacted. This is the first time we are seeing this whole image. This is history in the making. I am absolutely flabbergasted by the state of preservation. The mural had been known to exist. Old photographs taken aboard ship showed fragments of it in the background, but no one had ever documented the complete work. No one knew if it had survived the sinking. It had. For 83 years, in total darkness, 3 miles beneath the Pacific, the crew's pride remained painted on the walls, a testament to who they were and where they had been. A time capsule no one expected to find intact. The remotely operated vehicle, ROV, drifted toward the portside hangar deck. The roller doors were either missing or frozen in the raised position. For the first time in history, cameras entered Yorktown's interior. What they found changed everything known about the Midway battlefield. Aircraft. At least 3 Douglas SBD Dauntless dive bombers. The same type that had sunk Soryu on the morning of June 4. One lay inverted, its landing gear visible. Beneath the fuselage, secured in its release cradle, hung a bomb, still armed after 83 years. Another aircraft bore markings clearly visible through the sediment. B5 on the fuselage, a 5 on the upper wing surface. Researchers identified it as likely Bureau Number 4581, an aircraft from Enterprise's Bombing Squadron 6. The implications struck immediately. These planes had moved across decks during the battle, Enterprise aircraft landing on Yorktown when their own carrier was under attack or too far away. The carriers had operated as a team, sharing resources, absorbing each other's planes. The discovery marked the first time aircraft from the Battle of Midway had been found underwater. Previous expeditions had documented ships. Now the cameras had found the machines that had actually fought the battle. Were they being prepared for another strike when power was lost? Were pilots waiting to man them? The wreck held its silence. Deeper in the hangar, the ROV found something that made no sense. A vehicle, 4 wheels, rectangular body, canvas top in tatters, chrome bumper still gleaming faintly under the lights. A car, on an aircraft carrier. The operators stared. One spoke what everyone was thinking. That is a car. Closer inspection revealed details. A spare tire mounted on the rear, a split windshield, parking lights positioned above the headlights, chrome fender trim, the distinctive boxy shape of a late 1930s or early 1940s American automobile. Researchers identified it as likely a 1940 or 1941 Ford Super Deluxe, the Woody model with wood-paneled sides, a civilian vehicle completely out of place aboard a warship. The leading theory emerged quickly. Admiral Frank Jack Fletcher had commanded Task Force 17 from Yorktown's flag bridge. Senior officers sometimes brought personal vehicles aboard for use in port. The car may have been Fletcher's, but no records confirm this. No one knows for certain why a Ford station wagon was sitting in the hangar of an aircraft carrier during the most important naval battle of the Pacific War. NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, issued an open request asking automobile experts and the public to post any information they have. The mystery remains unsolved. The cameras documented what history books had only described: bomb damage on the main deck, near the midship elevator, craters where explosions had torn through steel, structural deformation radiating outward from impact points, extensive damage along the port side hull, torpedo strikes that had killed her power, plates buckled inward, seams ruptured across dozens of feet, and the anti-aircraft guns, still mounted, still trained upward, frozen in the positions they had held when the crew was fighting for their ship's life. The physical evidence told its own story. Men had fought here. They had fired until there was nothing left to fire at. They had worked to save their ship until the power failed and the list grew too steep. The damage patterns revealed the sequence of destruction, but they also raised questions. How much of the hull's vulnerability came from Coral Sea? How much from the repairs that were never completed? The wreck could not answer directly, but for the first time, researchers had the evidence to ask. The 72-hour repair became legend. 1,400 workers, rolling blackouts, a ship patched together through sheer will. The story is told as triumph, and it was. But triumph has a shadow. The superheater boilers were never repaired. Yorktown went to Midway limited to 20 knots. When torpedo bombers attacked, she could not outmaneuver them the way Enterprise or Hornet could. Those 12 missing knots may have cost her everything. The hull patches were welded instead of riveted. Faster to install, but welding creates rigid connections. Rivets flex. When torpedoes exploded against Yorktown's hull, damage extended 52 feet from the point of impact. Ships torpedoed at Pearl Harbor showed damage extending no more than 36 feet. The welded patches may have transmitted shock through the hull rather than absorbing it. And then the circuit breakers. The emergency diesel generator worked. Power was available. The electrical system had been damaged at Coral Sea, repaired under impossible time pressure, and never fully tested. When the breakers failed, no one could explain why. Short circuits occurred in wiring that had been hastily restored. The miracle that got Yorktown to Midway may have also written her death sentence. The ship that limped into battle carried weaknesses built into her bones during those frantic 72 hours. No one wants to say this. The repair effort was heroic. The workers performed beyond what anyone could reasonably ask. But heroism does not change physics. Shortcuts have consequences, and Yorktown paid for them. American carriers were built to survive. Japanese carriers were built to strike. This was not an accident. It was doctrine. American designers prioritized damage control systems, compartmentalization, and firefighting capability. Japanese designers prioritized speed, aircraft capacity, and offensive power. At Midway, the difference proved decisive. Akagi, Kaga, and Soryu each succumbed to fires that American damage control might have contained. Yorktown absorbed hits that would have destroyed her Japanese counterparts. But American design philosophy assumed one critical thing: backup systems would function. The entire damage control doctrine depended on power. Pumps needed electricity. Firefighting systems needed pressure. Counter-flooding required functioning valves and working communications. When Yorktown lost all power, her design advantages became irrelevant. Commander Aldrich reported it plainly from Central Station. Without power, nothing could be done to correct the list. The ship was built to survive, but survival required systems that had failed. Not from Japanese action, from short circuits and jury-rigged wiring that breakers could not contain. Captain Buckmaster faced an impossible choice. The list had reached 26 degrees. It was climbing. His engineering officer reported all power lost. His damage control officer confirmed nothing could stop the flooding. Both men believed capsizing was minutes away. Over 2,000 men stood on decks that were becoming walls. If the ship rolled, hundreds would be trapped below. Hundreds more would slide into the water with no chance of rescue. The mathematics of disaster pointed one direction. Buckmaster ordered, "Abandon ship." But Yorktown did not capsize. She floated for 3 more days. The salvage party that reboarded her actually reduced the list. They were making progress when I-168 found them. Was the decision premature? Hindsight says yes. The ship proved more resilient than anyone believed possible. With power restored from Hammond alongside, the crew was saving her. But Buckmaster did not have hindsight. He had a list of 26 degrees, no electricity, and 2,000 lives in his hands. He made the prudent call, the responsible call, the call that every manual and every piece of training told him to make. The wreck cannot judge him. It can only show what might have been. 3 miles down, nearly 17,000 feet beneath the Pacific, crushing pressure, absolute darkness, cold that never varies. This is where Yorktown rests. This is where her crew remains. The exact number of men who went down with her is uncertain. Most accounts say between 81 and 141 died during the battle and sinking. Some were killed by bomb blasts. Some were killed by torpedo explosions. Some went down with Hammond when the submarine I-168's torpedo broke her back. Others were lost during the abandonment or in the water afterward. Their bodies were never recovered. The depth made that impossible in 1942. It remains impossible today. The Navy recognizes what the wreck represents. In 2023, the Naval History and Heritage Command designated Yorktown a site of extraordinary character. She is a protected sunken military craft. Salvage is prohibited. Artifact removal is prohibited. The men who died defending her are afforded in death a protection their ship could not provide in battle. The extreme depth has preserved Yorktown like nowhere else on Earth. Paint still visible after 83 years. Guns still mounted. A mural still showing its colors. The cold, the pressure, and the darkness have created a time capsule. But that same depth makes every visit an expedition to the edge of technological capability. The men of Yorktown are beyond easy reach. They rest in a place few humans will ever see. Every ROV descent is two things at once: investigation and intrusion, discovery and disturbance. The cameras that found the mural also swept through spaces where men died. The lights that illuminated the aircraft also fell upon a tomb. The technology that answers questions also raises questions about whether those questions should be asked. Some believe the wreck should be left alone. The men have rested undisturbed for 8 decades. Peace has its own value. The dead cannot benefit from knowing what killed them. Others argue that understanding honors sacrifice. The families deserve answers about what happened to their fathers and grandfathers. Future sailors deserve lessons that might save lives in wars not yet fought. Silence protects no one except those who prefer comfortable myths to difficult truths. The tension has no resolution. It never does when the dead cannot speak for themselves. The mural speaks of pride. Sailors painted their ship's history on her walls. They traced her voyages across oceans. They marked the places she had been and the missions she had completed. They wanted everyone who walked past to know this ship mattered. This crew had done something worth remembering. The aircraft speak of duty, planes still armed, still positioned for the next mission. The crew had been preparing to fight again when power failed. They did not stop working until there was no work left to do. The car speaks of humanity. Somewhere in the chaos of war, someone had brought a piece of civilian life aboard. A station wagon for trips ashore. A reminder that the men who fought were also men who drove cars and had lives beyond the ship. The guns speak of defiance, still pointed skyward, still ready. The crews had fired until there was nothing left to fire at and no power to fire with. These are not just artifacts. They are evidence of who these men were, what they valued, how they faced the end. The Pacific holds them now, but what they left behind still speaks. The 2023 and 2025 expeditions revealed more than anyone expected. They also proved how much remains hidden. The complete interior has never been surveyed. Compartments below the hangar deck, engineering spaces where men fought to restore power, the places where decisions were made and systems failed. What other artifacts wait in the darkness? What evidence might explain the circuit breaker failures? What stories lie buried in sediment that grows deeper every year? The wreck is changing, slowly, imperceptibly, but changing. Corrosion works at steel that has resisted for 8 decades. Marine life colonizes surfaces that once gleamed with navy gray. Sediment settles into spaces that were once filled with urgency and fear. Some answers may be lost before technology can find them. The window for discovery is not infinite. Time moves differently 3 miles down, but it still moves. Future expeditions will return. Better cameras, more capable machines. Each generation of technology reveals what the previous could not see. What the next mission finds may challenge everything the current evidence suggests. The mystery is not solved. Mysteries never are completely. Yorktown was not simply lost at Midway. She helped win it. Her aircraft sank Soryu. Her hull absorbed both Japanese counterattacks. Every bomb and torpedo that struck her was one that did not strike Enterprise or Hornet. She drew the enemy's fury and gave her sisters time to deliver the killing blows. She did everything asked of her, more than everything. The men who sailed her did everything right. Damage control parties extinguished fires in an hour. Flight deck crews patched bomb holes so cleanly pilots could not find them. Engineers coaxed broken systems back to life. A captain made the hardest decision a commander can make. They did everything right. And still, the Pacific took her. 3 miles down, in permanent darkness, Yorktown holds her secrets. The cameras have shown us some. The mural, the aircraft, the car. The gun still pointed at an enemy that stopped coming 83 years ago. But the questions the cameras raised may matter more than the answers they provided. Questions about shortcuts made under pressure, about systems that failed when failure meant death, about what we ask of ships and the people who sail them. Understanding. Yorktown is not about assigning blame. It is about understanding what happens when assumptions meet reality, when miracles carry hidden costs, when doing everything right is still not enough. The Pacific keeps her now, but sometimes when the technology is ready and the will exists to look, she gives up fragments of truth. The men of Yorktown earned that much. The rest of us owe them at least the effort to understand.